Hi guys, it's Pete back again with another film review. Today I'm looking at War for the Planet of the Apes, following on from my previous review of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. So this movie came out in 2014 and I was really looking forward to it when this one came out. It wasn't the same situation as with Rise where I was sort of just not that interested. Rise had really got me on board with this new Apes franchise, plus what I was seeing on the trailers leading up to this looked like we were getting a really interesting sort of a movie. So I was very hyped for this movie when it came out, and it was one of those wonderful occasions where at the time my expectations, as high as they were actually surpassed by how good this movie was. This at the time to me felt like a flat out masterpiece, and if I'm honest, when I watch it now I still feel the same. I think the opening 20 minutes of this film, the way it starts and the sort of the strength of vision and the boldness and the sort of the chances this movie takes, emotionally, the depth emotionally, the maturity of the filmmaking, and the amount of emotional investment they're able to give to apes is incredible. And the amount of characterization you get in this movie is incredible. I mean, the first one was very good at building up character relationships, more so with the action. And this one manages to go one better by having amazing action, that's also complemented by some really good characterizations, particularly on the part of the apes. And again, it was amazing motion capture work back in 2014. I mean, now I would say it still looks good, but there are, again, the odd bit where you can tell, but in general, I'd say it looks much better than Rise and hasn't dated in the same way, but I'm guessing this one had a lot more money chucked at it. And Andy Serkis, again, was given a really good character to work with Caesar again. I mean, in the first movie we had that progression of him becoming a leader, so you would have thought that his journey in this one wouldn't have been that interesting because he is a leader at the beginning and he's a leader, as it goes. But this one's more about him preserving his leadership and certain other characters challenging it, and he's put under such difficult situations because he is very conflicted, whereas he's on the side of the apes, obviously, but he also is aware that some humans are good because of his upbringing with harking back to the first movie, which is another thing that I really like, even though this movie is a different director and it's a different take and it's a very different movie, it links back very well to the first Rise of Planet of the Apes. And a few of the supporting apes in the first movie also get a lot more fleshed out here. Like characters like Maurice, particularly Cobra, is much more fleshed out in this one. And it's interesting because when you go back and watch Rise, you see a little bit more of those characters. They just seem like background characters when you first watch it. Caesar's the only one you really remember. But after having watched Dawn, it's interesting to watch Rise again. And you see these really cool supporting characters that are continued on, through these other movies that become very important players in this particular one. So the characterisation was much deeper. The conflict he had to deal with was much more of a much bigger scale as well. The first one was more of an internal conflict and an escape kind of movie. This is Caesar really having to stop this war from happening, or trying to stop this war from happening. And of course, on the human side, you've got Jason Clarke, who's very good. I think the film does get a little criticised for how boring the humans are compared to the apes. And for me, I've never had a problem with the humans in this film. I think that the movie does a smart thing by starting from the apes' point of view. Very ballsy. The opening 20 minutes has little to no dialogue, and I still think that's a very bold opening. Even all this time later, it still amazes me how well that first 20 minutes gets across exactly what this film's about, and then you get the humans coming into it. And I think that for this particular movie, you needed the humans. You need to understand the human plight as well, because they are have lost people, aren't in the best place emotionally, and even the person who you perceive to be the villain in terms of humans really does have an emotional weight behind him, and you understand that it's coming from the perspective of a guy who's lost everything, who's lost his family, who's lost everything, and he's just trying to survive. And this is really the underlying thing: is both societies are trying to survive, and it's can they coexist, or are they going to end up coming to blows? And it speaks also to real world issues in terms of how difficult it is to reach peace agreements. And you watch this film and understand why so many times these peace agreements fall through or they don't work, because one side can't let go what the other side's done to them, and they're constantly on the defensive, thinking, well, we need to attack them first before they get us, and all this kind of thing is still going on. It's still sort of being talked about today, whether you talk about nuclear weapons or other areas of, government policy and situations where there's conflict and people trying to reach some sort of, amicable agreement. And really what this film highlights is, in order for that to happen, it needs to be, these people need to put their differences aside and they need to sit down and talk it out, and that's the only way you're going to really resolve these sort of issues. But, as you can probably tell, it's fairly difficult for that to come to pass in this movie, especially when we've got, another one coming around the corner. So, without going into any spoilers, it isn't the happiest of endings, and this is very much a downbeat, somber film, with a little humour here and there, but in general it's not a very laugh-a-minute movie. But it works very, very well. It's very, very gripping. You never feel like really overly depressed by it. I just think that it's just something that is intense in the way that it's presented, and if you like those kind of films, and I love those kind of movies, you really get a lot out of this. It's not just a wham-bam action movie. If you want that, this isn't necessarily your sort of movie, although there is some really, really good action in it. Overall, it's more of a character piece, and again, the villain Cobra, who was introduced in the first movie, as I said, he gets much more fleshed out here, and he really is a relatable villain. You understand that he's been tortured by humans, and he doesn't like humans, and you understand his reasons for not liking humans. But then that hate that he has sort of fuels him to do worse things. And again, he's a very relatable character. And it's like we're talking about a CGI monkey here. This isn't even a human character we're talking about, and that is what makes this film so outstanding, is that you take these characters as serious, real characters when we are talking about a character that's not even human to start off with, and B, a computer-generated character that you never really stop to question whether it's real or not. You are always thinking these characters are real characters, and they're going through real drama and real pain, and that is unprecedented, I think, in modern cinema and in special effects cinema. It's more about how cool something can look, or how big it can be, or how much it can kick ass. It's not about the actual emotions behind the character. And this is very much what this film did, to absolute perfection, in my opinion. So it's difficult to talk about it in any more detail without going into any spoilers. And if you haven't seen it, I don't want to, really. I probably have given a little too much away already. But even all these years later, it still impresses to me the same way it did when it first came out. Mainly due to Andy Serkis' brilliant central performance. Also, all the other things I've talked about. The direction from Matt Reeves was absolutely phenomenal in this film, and it really set a precedent for this other film. The last one of the trilogy is hopefully going to sort of tie up those loose ends and continue and finish that story of Caesar's story, because that's what makes this trilogy so good, is it's focused on this character's journey and his conflict. It's not so much focused on all the action, all the other things that are going on. First and foremost, it's a character story. The difference being that they've chosen to be an ape, not a human. Again, that's what I would say is very risky about this movie. It also pays off wonderfully. I'm trying to think of a negative, really. For me, there wasn't much. Even pacing-wise, I felt this movie did very, very well. It didn't, despite the fact it's not action-packed all the way through, it's still tense. There's always this air of tension, because you just get the impression that this sort of peace that's going on between the humans and the apes is so fragile. At any moment, it could all go under, and it could all be cast aside, and each scene is sort of filled with this sort of underlying tension of something might go wrong, or something is going to go wrong. And I think that makes it very, very intense and very interesting to watch, even if, when I think about it later, there's not a great deal of action in it. Like I said, I suppose if you were going to say a negative, it would be the human characters, if you were pushed to it, because they don't get that much screen time, and they aren't maybe sketched out as well as like the apes, even though you do understand where they're coming from. But personally, it's not a problem for me, but that would be my minor nitpick with it. Apart from that, though, it is an excellent film, and it really does stand up the test of time. And to me, this was very much like the Dark Knight trilogy, in that the first one was good, Batman Begins and Rise was good, and Dark Knight just upped the ante and up the sort of complexity of what's going on. And I think that this did the same thing. And whether the third one is like Rises or not, we'll have to see. But I do feel there's a good comparison made between these two trilogies so far. So Overall, I'd definitely say it's a 10 out of 10 for me. Pretty flawless movie, and it still stands up well now. If you haven't seen it, you can watch this movie in isolation. You don't need to have seen Rise, but it does help to understand the whole story, to have seen both of them, and to understand Caesar's story in particular. But it does work very well as a standalone movie too.